The queen ordered him to be beaten, but she didn't expect the slave to hit back, reaches its dramatic peak, when Reed activates his hidden gravity switch during his third punishment. In an astonishing reversal of power, he shuts off artificial gravity everywhere, except beneath his own feet. As Vicari guards float helplessly, Reed broadcasts his defiant message. "You wanted weight. You got it." The Queen's hologram flickers in shock. Hierarchy upended in a single, masterful stroke. The amber storms of the gas giant churned below Vector 8, casting an eerie glow through the observation ports. Reed stood motionless before one such port, his scarred hands clasped behind his back, watching the hypnotic swirl of gases. The orbital station hummed around him, a mechanical heartbeat that he knew more intimately than most. "Slave technician, you are not authorized for Corridor 7 Alpha." Reed didn't turn at the sound of the Vicari guard's voice. He knew the punishment that awaited him, had calculated it precisely. 3 more seconds of gazing at the storm, 3 seconds of beauty before pain. "I am aware," he finally said, turning to face the tall, silver-skinned guard. The Vicari's neural implants pulsed blue beneath translucent flesh, a constant reminder of their technological superiority. Or so they believed. "The Queen has been notified of your transgression." The guard's voice carried no emotion, merely procedure. "Follow me to the gravity platform." Reed nodded once and fell into step behind the guard. The corridors of Vector 8 narrowed as they moved deeper into the station, away from the observation decks where even slaves were occasionally permitted. Metal walls closed in, the ceiling lowered, and the artificial lighting grew harsher. The route to punishment was designed to compress the spirit before the body. They passed several maintenance workers, humans like Reed, their eyes downcast when the guard approached, then lifting briefly to Reed with a mixture of fear and something else. Something that might have been hope. Marcus, a stocky man with prematurely gray hair, caught Reed's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Reed returned it just as subtly. The preparations were nearly complete. The gravity platform occupied the geometric center of Vector 8, directly above the massive generators that maintained the station's artificial gravity and kept it in stable orbit around the gas giant. The platform itself was a circular space 20 meters in diameter, with a polished black floor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A dozen Vicari guards stood at the perimeter, their posture identical, their silver skin reflecting the harsh lighting. And at the center of the platform, a shimmering hologram flickered into existence. Queen Varela of the Vicari, her elongated form nearly 3 meters tall, her silver skin adorned with intricate, luminescent patterns denoting her royal lineage. Her eyes, entirely black except for pinpoints of white light, fixed on Reed. "This one again," she said, her voice echoing with digital artifacts. The Queen rarely appeared in person, preferring to project her image from the secure chambers of the royal quarter. "What was his infraction?" "Unauthorized presence in Corridor 7 Alpha. Your magnitude," replied the lead guard. "Again!" The holographic Queen tilted her head. "This is the 3rd violation of the same restriction. Clearly, the previous corrections were insufficient." Reed stood with his hands at his sides, eyes forward, expression neutral. He had learned long ago that reaction only prolonged the punishment. "Your magnitude," a new voice spoke. A female Vicari officer stepped forward from the circle of guards. Her silver skin bore fewer markings than the others. She was younger, her neural implants still showing the bright blue of recent calibration. "This slave technician's work record is exemplary. The gravity generators in Section 4 were stabilized ahead of schedule due to his interventions last cycle." The Queen's hologram shifted, focusing on the officer. "You defend a human, Sierra?" "I merely state facts relevant to asset evaluation. Your magnitude," the officer, Sierra, replied, her voice carefully modulated. "Facts." The Queen seemed to taste the word. The fact is that discipline must be maintained. Pain is the most efficient teacher. She turned her attention back to Reed. Beat him, until he understands his place. 2 guards stepped forward, each carrying a grav baton, weapons that could manipulate local gravity fields, increasing or decreasing the apparent weight of anything they touched. Reed had seen a man's ribcage crushed by a poorly calibrated grav baton. He had also helped design the calibration protocols. The first blow came without warning, striking Reed's left shoulder. The baton was set to increase weight, and Reed felt as if his arm had suddenly become filled with lead. He staggered but remained standing. The second blow hit his right thigh, nearly buckling his knee. Still, he did not fall. "Kneel," ordered the lead guard, his voice flat. Reed met the guard's eyes and did not move. The third blow caught him across the back, multiplying the weight of his upper body. Reed's muscles strained against the invisible force, veins standing out on his neck, but he remained upright. From the corner of his eye, he saw Officer Sierra's hand move to her temple, a gesture he recognized. Her neural implants were registering anomalous stress patterns. Interesting. Not all Vicari were comfortable with the Queen's preferred methods of correction. "He remains standing," the Queen observed, a note of something like curiosity in her digitized voice. "Increase intensity." The guards adjusted their batons. The next blow sent Reed to one knee, the sudden gravitational shift so intense that he felt the platform beneath him groan in sympathy. But he pushed himself back up, muscles trembling with effort. "Why does he resist?" the Queen asked, more to herself than anyone present. "It prolongs the inevitable." Reed said nothing. He had long ago learned that explanations were wasted on the Vicari elite. They did not see humans as beings capable of complex thought, merely tools with occasionally inconvenient displays of will. After the 7th blow, Reed finally fell to both knees, his body unable to counteract the gravitational manipulation any longer. The guards stepped back, awaiting further instructions. "Do you understand your restrictions now, human?" the Queen asked. Reed raised his head, meeting the holographic gaze directly, a breach of protocol that caused several guards to shift uncomfortably. "I understand gravity," he replied, his voice rough but steady. The Queen's hologram flickered, perhaps from surprise at his response. "Return him to maintenance duties. Monitor his movements more carefully." As the hologram winked out, Reed was hauled to his feet by 2 guards. His body ached from the gravitational assault, but his mind was clear, focused. He had confirmed what he needed to know. As he was escorted from the platform, Officer Sierra fell into step beside the group. "That was unwise," she said quietly. The Queen rarely takes personal interest in correction proceedings. Reed glanced at her, noting the slight furrow between her silvery brows. "Yet, here you are," he observed. Sierra's neural implants pulsed more rapidly. "I am responsible for maintenance efficiency in my sector. You are an asset I would prefer not to see damaged." "An asset," Reed repeated, his tone neutral. "Of course." When they reached the junction that would return Reed to the maintenance level, Sierra dismissed the other guards with a gesture. "I will complete the escort," she said. They departed without question, Sierra's authority, while Junior, compared to other officers, was still absolute over regular guards. Once they were alone in the corridor, Sierra spoke again. "Why Corridor 7, Alpha? There are no observation ports there. Nothing of interest to a human." Reed studied her face, considering how much to reveal. "It's not a corridor," he finally said. "It's the station's axis." Sierra's implants flashed with rapid calculation. "That makes no logical sense. Vector 8 has multiple axes depending on reference frame." "Exactly," Reed said, a hint of something like satisfaction in his voice. "Reference frames matter." Before Sierra could respond, Reed turned and continued toward the maintenance level, leaving the confused officer behind. His scarred hands flexed at his sides, feeling the slight gravitational fluctuations that no one else on the station seemed to notice. No one, except perhaps Marcus, who was waiting for him in the shadowed alcove just inside the maintenance sector. "You're insane," Marcus whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Third time in that corridor? The Queen herself noticed you now." Reed leaned against the wall, finally allowing himself to feel the pain from the beating. "That was the point. Was it worth it? Did you confirm your theory?" Reed nodded once. "The fluctuations are strongest there. It's directly above the primary gravity coupling." Marcus ran a hand through his gray hair. "That doesn't help us unless you can actually do something with that information." Reed held up his right hand, examining his scarred fingers. "I'm working on something, but I need materials from Section 6. "The restricted storage?" Marcus shook his head. "Impossible. After your little display today, they'll be watching you even more closely." "Not me," Reed said. "You—" Marcus stepped back. "No. No way. I've got Lena to think about. If they catch me—" "They won't," Reed interrupted. "You're just retrieving parts for authorized repairs in Section 3. I've already logged the requisition under Lieutenant Veith's ID." "You forged a Vicari officer's requisition?" Marcus's voice rose in pitch before he caught himself, glancing nervously down the corridor. "That's execution-level tampering. So is what I'm planning next," Reed said calmly. "But you don't need to know that part. Plausible deniability." Marcus stared at him, conflict evident in his weathered face. "You're going to get us all killed, Reed." "Or free," Reed countered. "It depends on your perspective, your reference frame." After a long moment, Marcus sighed. "What exactly am I looking for in Section 6? Reed smiled slightly, the first time since the beating began. "A microgravitational field modulator, about the size of your thumbnail. For the next 3 cycles." Reed worked methodically in the maintenance shafts that ran behind Vector 8's primary systems. These narrow passages were technically restricted to authorized maintenance personnel, but as the most skilled technician in the human contingent, Reed had more or less unrestricted access to them. The Vicari, with their larger frames, rarely ventured into these cramped spaces, preferring to rely on automated systems and human slaves for repairs. It was in these shafts, surrounded by the hum of machinery and bathed in the red glow of emergency lighting, that Reed recalled the childhood that had led him here. He had been born on Earth, in what had once been called Australia before the Vicari arrival. His earliest memories were of his mother, a gravitational physicist, explaining to him how the world worked. "Everything is about relationship," she would say. "Mass attracts mass, space bends. Nothing exists in isolation." Then came the Vicari ships, descending through the atmosphere like silver needles. They had not come as conquerors, at least, not at first. They came offering technology, knowledge, a place among the stars. But their definition of place turned out to be hierarchical in ways humanity hadn't anticipated. Reed was 10 when his mother was taken to work on Vicari gravity drive systems. He was 12 when he learned she had died in an unfortunate laboratory accident. He was 14 when the first human classification systems were implemented, sorting the population into usefulness categories. And he was 17 when he was designated a technical asset and shipped off-world to serve on Vicari stations. 15 years had passed since then. 15 years of learning, observing, and planning. In the red-lit maintenance shaft, Reed carefully soldered microscopic components onto the stolen gravitational field modulator. The device was Vicari technology, designed to make minute adjustments to artificial gravity systems. Reed was modifying it for a very different purpose. His hands, scarred from years of work with caustic repair compounds and sharp-edged machinery, moved with delicate precision. What he was creating would look, to casual inspection, like nothing more than a slightly thickened fingernail. But beneath that disguise was a switch that could, at least temporarily, override the station's gravitational controls. A soft sound at the entrance to the shaft made Reed freeze. He carefully slid the device under a maintenance panel before turning. Officer Sierra stood at the junction, her silver form awkwardly bent to peer into the human-sized passage. Her neural implants pulsed with a pattern Reed hadn't seen before. Curiosity, perhaps, or suspicion. "Slave technician," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the metal confines. "You weren't at your assigned post." Reed gestured to the open panel beside him. "Gravitational fluctuations in Section 4B. I logged the repair." Sierra's implants pulsed again. "Yes, I saw the log. But this is the third fluctuation you've reported this cycle. The automated diagnostics show no anomalies." "The automated diagnostics aren't calibrated for microfluctuations," Reed replied, keeping his voice respectful but firm. "Human nervous systems can detect variations as small as 0.002 G under the right conditions." "Can they?" Sierra's head tilted slightly. "That's not in our data on human capabilities." Reed allowed himself a small shrug. "There's a lot about humans that isn't in your data." The Vicari officer studied him for a long moment. "You are unusual, Reed. You don't respond to correction like the others." "I respond," Reed said. "Just not how the Queen expects." "No," Sierra agreed. "Not how any of us expect." She hesitated, then added, "The Queen has ordered another correction detail for you tomorrow. Your continued presence in unauthorized areas has been noted." Reed nodded, unsurprised. "I'll report to the gravity platform at the designated time." "Why?" Sierra asked suddenly. "Why continue these violations when you know the consequences?" Reed met her gaze steadily. "Because consequences aren't always what they appear to be." Sierra's implants flashed rapidly. Confusion, Reed thought. She wasn't used to cryptic answers from humans. After another long moment, she withdrew from the shaft entrance without further comment. When he was certain, she was gone. Reed retrieved his device and continued working. By the time he returned to the cramped sleeping quarters, assigned to maintenance personnel, the gravitational switch was complete. He carefully affixed it beneath his right thumbnail, where it was virtually indistinguishable from his natural nail. Marcus was waiting for him, his face drawn with worry. "There are rumors," he said quietly, as Reed settled onto his narrow bunk. "Guards talking about a special detail tomorrow. For you." "I know," Reed replied. "Officer Sierra informed me." "Sierra?" Marcus's eyebrows rose. "The young one? She sought you out specifically?" Reed nodded. "She's curious. Different from the others." "Different or not, she's still Vicari," Marcus warned. "Don't mistake curiosity for sympathy." "I don't," Reed assured him. "But her interest could be useful." Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice further, although the other bunks in their section were empty. Most of the maintenance crew was working night rotation. "Is it ready, your device?" "Yes." "And will you use it tomorrow?" Reed flexed his right hand, feeling the slight weight of the disguise switch beneath his nail. "Not yet. One more test first." "They'll kill you this time," Marcus said, fear evident in his voice. "The Queen doesn't like being defied." "She doesn't understand defiance," Reed corrected. "She understands only dominance and submission. I'm introducing a third option." Marcus shook his head. "You and your options. Your theories. Sometimes I think your mother made you too smart for your own good." Reed smiled faintly at the mention of his mother. "She made me exactly smart enough. I think." The next morning, Reed deliberately walked through Corridor 7 Alpha again. This time, he didn't stop at the observation port. He walked the entire length of the corridor, his hands trailing along the walls, feeling the subtle vibrations of the station, feeling the heart of Vector 8 through his fingertips. The guards were waiting for him when he emerged. They didn't speak, merely gesturing for him to accompany them to the gravity platform. Reed complied without resistance. Everything was proceeding according to his calculations. This time, the platform held more than the usual complement of guards. 8 Vicari officers stood in a semicircle, including Sierra, whose implants pulsed with a rapid rhythm that Reed interpreted as anxiety. And, in the center, the Queen's hologram awaited, larger than before, her digital presence enhanced to emphasize her authority. "The human returns," she said, her synthetic voice echoing in the chamber. Unchanged by correction. Reed stood at attention, his face expressionless. The guards on either side of him kept their grav batons at ready position. "Your magnitude." One of the senior officers stepped forward, Lieutenant Veith, whose ID Reed had borrowed for the requisition. "Perhaps this one is defective. Some humans have neurological abnormalities that prevent proper response to pain stimuli." The Queen's hologram shifted, focusing on Veith. "An interesting theory. Shall we test it with increased correction parameters?" Veith bowed slightly. "As you command, your magnitude." The Queen turned her attention back to Reed. "You will kneel before the correction begins. It is the proper posture for a human receiving guidance." Reed remained standing, his eyes fixed on the hologram. "You refuse?" The Queen's voice carried a note of genuine surprise. "After experiencing the consequences of defiance?" "I'm not defying you," Reed said calmly. "I'm offering a demonstration." A ripple of unease passed through the assembled Vicari. Humans did not offer anything to the Queen. "Restrain him," the Queen ordered, her hologram flickering with what might have been anger. 4 guards moved forward, grav batons raised. Reed made no move to resist as they surrounded him. The first blow came from behind, striking between his shoulder blades and instantly multiplying the weight of his upper body. He staggered forward, but caught himself. The second blow hit his left leg, and the third, his right shoulder. The combined gravitational manipulation made movement nearly impossible. Each limb felt as if it were encased in solid lead. "Kneel," commanded Lieutenant Veith. Reed, muscles straining against the gravitational assault, remained upright. His eyes moved from the Queen's hologram to Officer Sierra, whose implants were now pulsing so rapidly they appeared to be a solid blue light. "Fascinating," the Queen said. "Lieutenant Veith may be correct. This one seems physically incapable of proper submission." She paused, then added, "Increase to maximum correction. Let us see if his spine can withstand triple normal gravity." The guards adjusted their batons. Reed knew what was coming. A gravitational field so intense it could potentially crush his vertebrae if applied directly to his spine. It was the moment he had been waiting for. As the lead guard raised his baton for the strike, Reed pressed his right thumb against his index finger, activating the hidden switch. For a fraction of a second, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a low hum that quickly built to a reverberating drone, the artificial gravity throughout the platform, throughout the entire station, shut down. Everywhere except in a small bubble surrounding Reed himself. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Vicari guards, unprepared for sudden weightlessness, began to drift upward from the platform, their grav batons, no longer in contact with the floor's power grid, deactivated. Loose objects, data pads, ceremonial insignia, even droplets of condensation from the station's environmental systems floated gently into the air. Only Reed remained anchored to the platform, standing in his personal bubble of gravity. The Queen's hologram flickered wildly, the projection system struggling to maintain coherence in the changing conditions. "What is this?" her disembodied voice demanded. "What have you done?" Reed didn't answer immediately. He was busy calculating trajectories. One of the guards, spinning uncontrollably in the zero-gravity environment, was heading toward a sharp edge of the platform's control console. Reed pushed off from his position, using his gravity bubble to control his movement, and intercepted the guard before collision. With a gentle push, he redirected the Vicari to a safer path. Another guard had drawn a plasma sidearm and was attempting to aim at Reed, but without gravity or leverage. Each tiny movement sent the guard spinning in the opposite direction. Reed moved easily through the chaos, using principles of momentum and surface tension that he had studied extensively. The lead guard, recovering faster than the others, managed to grab onto a ceiling fixture and orient himself. "Shoot him!" he shouted to the others. "The human has sabotaged the gravity systems." Reed reached the central control panel and placed his hand on the communications array. His voice, amplified by the station's emergency broadcast system, filled not just the platform, but every corridor and chamber of Vector 8. "You wanted weight," he said simply. "You got it." The Queen's hologram had stabilized somewhat, though her image still occasionally distorted with interference. "You cannot maintain this disruption," she said, her voice cold with certainty. "The backup systems will engage within minutes. 3 minutes and 42 seconds, to be precise," Reed agreed. "Unless the secondary couplings have been manually recalibrated." The Queen's holographic eyes narrowed. "Which would require physical access to the gravity core. Access you do not have." Reed smiled slightly. "Corridor 7 Alpha isn't just a corridor. It's directly above the core. The vibrations travel up through the structure, microscopic fluctuations that contain information if you know how to interpret them. I've been listening to the core for months, speaking to it through the fluctuations I create by walking that corridor, rewriting its parameters with each passage." For perhaps the first time in Vector 8's history, the Queen was speechless. Officer Sierra, who had managed to anchor herself to a console, stared at Reed with an expression that might have been fear or awe. "That's impossible," she said. "The core is secure, isolated." "Nothing is isolated," Reed replied. "Everything exists in relationship. Mass attracts mass. Space bends." He turned back to the Queen's hologram. "And hierarchies fall." The Queen's image suddenly solidified, her posture straightening with renewed authority. "Lieutenant Veith, execute this human immediately. He threatens the entire station." Vath, still floating helplessly near the ceiling, looked alarmed. "Your magnitude, in these conditions, precision fire is impossible. We might damage critical systems." "I don't care," the Queen snapped. "Kill him now!" Reed remained calm. "If I die, Vector 8 dies with me. The gravitational calibrations I've introduced are keeping us in stable orbit. Without continuous adjustment over the next 12 hours, the station will begin to spiral into the gas giant." "He's bluffing," Lieutenant Veith said, though uncertainty tinged his voice. "Am I?" Reed asked. "Check the orbital telemetry. The station has already shifted 2 degrees from its standard path." Sierra, at her console, quickly pulled up the relevant data. Her implants flashed with alarm. "He's right," she confirmed. "We're off course. The automated correction systems are non-responsive." The Queen's hologram flickered again, this time with what Reed recognized as a transmission being received. She was consulting with someone outside the platform, likely the Vicari Council. "Restore gravity," she finally ordered. "Release the station systems." "Not until we negotiate," Reed replied. "Negotiate?" The Queen's voice rose with indignation. "Humans do not negotiate with Vicari. You are tools, assets. Assets you're about to lose if that orbit decays any further." Reed pointed out, "I've studied every centimeter of this station's gravity systems. I've repaired them, improved them, understood them in ways your engineers never bothered to. You need me now." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Vicari guards attempting to stabilize their positions in the zero-gravity environment. Reed waited patiently. He had calculated this confrontation down to the second, including the time the Queen would need to recognize her limited options. "What do you want?" she finally asked, her voice cold with suppressed rage. "Reclassification," Reed answered promptly. "I am no longer a slave technician. I am Station Systems Coordinator, with authority over the gravity generators and all related systems. Impossible, Lieutenant Veith interjected. No human can hold coordinator rank. Then rename the position, Reed suggested. The title is irrelevant. The authority is what matters. The Queen's hologram seemed to grow larger, more imposing. And if we refuse? If we simply wait for the backup systems to engage? Then we all die together, Reed said simply. The gas giant will embrace us equally, Vicari and human alike. Another long silence. Reed could almost see the calculations running behind the Queen's holographic eyes, weighing pride against survival, tradition against necessity. Restore gravity now, she finally said. Full systems control. We will consider your proposal while the station is secured. Reed knew better than to trust a Vicari promise, especially one made under duress. Officer Sierra will remain with me as liaison and witness, he stipulated. No execution orders will be issued against any human on this station for a minimum of one full cycle. The Queen's gaze shifted to Sierra, whose implants were still pulsing rapidly with stress and confusion. You trust this particular Vicari? She asked Reed, genuine curiosity in her tone. I trust her capacity for adaptation, Reed replied. A useful quality in uncertain gravity. After another moment of silent calculation, the Queen nodded once. Agreed. One cycle. Sierra will observe. Now restore the systems. Reed pressed his thumb to his index finger again, deactivating the switch. Gradually, gravity returned throughout the platform and the station beyond. The floating guards and equipment began to settle back to the floor, some more gracefully than others. The Queen's hologram stabilized completely. Systems Coordinator Reed, she said, pronouncing the new title with obvious distaste. Report to the gravity core immediately. Ensure the station's orbit is secure. Reed inclined his head slightly, not quite a bow, but an acknowledgement. Officer Sierra, he said, turning to the still shaken Vicari. Shall we? Sierra looked from Reed to the Queen, clearly uncertain about her new role. The Queen gave a slight nod, and Sierra moved to join Reed at the platform exit. This is not over, the Queen said as they departed. Merely recalibrated. Like gravity itself, Reed agreed, and led Sierra into the corridor. The walk to the gravity core was silent, both Reed and Sierra processing the dramatic shift in circumstances. They passed several groups of confused Vicarian humans, all trying to restore order after the temporary loss of gravity. Word of what had happened on the platform hadn't spread yet, but Reed knew it would soon. News of this magnitude couldn't be contained. The gravity core was located at the geometric center of Vector 8, surrounded by multiple security checkpoints. As they approached the first one, Sierra spoke for the first time since leaving the platform. They'll try to kill you the moment the station is secure, she said quietly. Reed nodded. I know. Then why did you only ask for one cycle? Why not demand permanent protection? Because it wouldn't be honored, Reed replied. Better to make a demand they might actually keep than one they'll certainly break. Sierra's implants pulsed with a new pattern, something Reed interpreted as grudging respect. You understand Vicari politics better than you should. I understand power, Reed corrected. It's rarely where people think it is. The security checkpoint ahead was staffed by 2 Vicari guards, who looked surprised to see Sierra accompanying a human. Before they could question the arrangement, Sierra's implants flashed a command code that made the guards step aside immediately. Council override, she explained as they passed through. The Queen must have informed them of your new status. Temporary status, Reed said. We both know that. Sierra glanced at him curiously. Yet you seem unconcerned. I've had 15 years to prepare for this day, Reed told her. One way or another, everything changes now. The gravity core itself was a massive spherical chamber, 30 meters in diameter, with the actual gravitational generator suspended in the center, a complex arrangement of interlocking rings surrounding a pulsing blue-white energy source. Walkways extended from the entrance to the central mechanism, with various control stations positioned along their length. Several Vicari technicians looked up in shock as Reed and Sierra entered. One of them, a senior engineer by his markings, stepped forward. "Officer Sierra, humans are not permitted in the core," he said firmly. "This human is," Sierra replied. "By direct order of the Queen, Systems Coordinator Reed is here to stabilize our orbit." The engineer's implants flashed with alarm. "Systems Coordinator? There is no such position for—" "There is now," Sierra interrupted. "Unless you wish to explain to the Queen why you countermanded her emergency directive." The engineer stepped back, confusion evident in his expression. "What is happening, Officer Sierra?" "Adaptation," Sierra said simply. "Now clear the primary control station. The coordinator needs access." Reed moved to the indicated console, his scarred hands hovering over the controls with a familiarity that clearly unsettled the watching Vicari. Despite never having had official access to the core, he navigated the systems with expert precision. "The orbital decay is accelerating," he noted, studying the telemetry data. "We need to rebalance the gravitational field immediately." For the next several hours, Reed worked continuously at the core controls, making minute adjustments to Vector 8's artificial gravity. The process was delicate. Too much correction too quickly could tear the station apart, while too little would fail to arrest the decay of their orbit around the gas giant. Sierra remained by his side throughout, alternating between observing his work and monitoring communications from the Vicari Council. Reed was aware of her scrutiny, but focused entirely on the task at hand. His life, everyone's lives, depended on his ability to stabilize the station. "The Council is in emergency session," Sierra informed him quietly as he completed another series of adjustments. "Debating your fate." Reed nodded without looking up. "And yours, I imagine." Sierra's implants pulsed with surprise. "Mine?" "You're associated with me now," Reed explained. "That makes you either a valuable liaison or a dangerous sympathizer, depending on the Council's perspective." "I am following the Queen's orders," Sierra said stiffly. Reed glanced at her briefly. "Is that all you're doing?" Before she could respond, the console chimed with an alert. Reed's attention snapped back to the readouts. "We're stabilizing," he announced. "Orbital decay has stopped. Now we need to correct our position." The Vicari engineers, who had been watching from a respectful distance, murmured among themselves. Reed had accomplished in hours what would normally take days of careful calculation and adjustment. "How did you learn to do this?" Sierra asked softly. "Your file shows no formal training in gravitational engineering." "My mother was a physicist," Reed replied, his hands still moving across the controls. "Before the Vicari came, she taught me to understand how the universe holds itself together." He paused, then added, "and how to take it apart when necessary." Sierra was silent for a moment, processing this information. "The device under your nail," she finally said. "It wasn't just a gravity disruptor, was it? It was keyed specifically to Vector 8 systems." Reed nodded. "I built it from components I could access. Limited range, limited duration, but enough." "You could have escaped," Sierra realized. "Taken a shuttle during the confusion. Why risk everything on a confrontation?" Reed finally turned to face her fully. "Because escape isn't freedom. Not really. I would always be running. Always a slave in hiding. This way, something actually changes." "For how long?" Sierra asked. "The Council won't accept a human in authority. Not permanently." "Long enough," Reed said cryptically, turning back to the console. The final adjustments took another hour, by which time Reed's hands were cramping from the precise manipulations required. But finally, Vector 8 had returned to its proper orbital path, its gravity systems functioning normally once more. As he stepped back from the console, Reed felt the exhaustion he'd been holding at bay wash over him. 30 hours without sleep. The stress of the confrontation. The beating he'd endured. All of it caught up to him at once. Sierra noticed his fatigue. "You need rest," she observed. "Where should I escort you? The maintenance quarters or—" "Neither," came a new voice from the core entrance. Lieutenant Veith stood there, flanked by 4 guards with plasma weapons drawn. His implants pulsed with cold satisfaction. "The Queen requests the systems coordinator's presence," Veith announced, placing mocking emphasis on Reed's new title. "Immediately." Sierra stepped forward. "The one-cycle protection agreement remains in effect," Veith interrupted. "The human will not be harmed, merely debriefed." Reed exchanged a glance with Sierra. They both knew debriefing could cover a multitude of unpleasant possibilities. "Officer Sierra will accompany us," Reed said firmly. "As witness." Veith's implants flashed with annoyance, but he nodded curtly. "As you wish, Coordinator. It changes nothing." The journey to the Queen's chambers took them through parts of Vector 8 that Reed had never seen before. The upper levels reserved for Vicari Elite. The corridors here were wider, the lighting softer, the air itself somehow fresher. Human maintenance workers they passed stared in open shock at the sight of Reed walking among the Vicari guards as something other than a prisoner. The Queen's reception chamber was a vast space dominated by a dais at its center. Unlike the projection Reed had grown accustomed to, Queen Varela was physically present this time, her elongated silver form even more imposing in reality than as a hologram. She sat upon a floating gravity chair, the technology similar to what Reed had used in his nail switch, but vastly more sophisticated. Beside her stood 2 other Vicari counselors that Reed recognized from station broadcasts, Zex and Krex, the Queen's most trusted advisors. "The human who rewrote gravity," the Queen said as Reed was brought before her. Her actual voice lacked the digital artifacts of her holographic projection, but carried the same cold authority. "Approach." Reed moved forward until he stood at the base of the dais. He did not bow. "Your orbit is stable," he reported simply. "The gravitational field has been recalibrated to compensate for the disruption." "So we've been informed," the Queen replied. "Your expertise is unexpected." Counselor Zex stepped forward, his implants pulsing with barely contained anger. "This human held the entire station hostage. Your magnitude, regardless of his technical skills. Such an action cannot go unpunished." "We agreed to terms," Reed reminded them calmly. "One cycle of protection." "Terms forced under duress," Counselor Krex countered. "Hardly binding." The Queen raised a long-fingered hand for silence. "The terms will be honored," she said, surprising everyone in the chamber. "For the duration specified, but your future, systems coordinator, remains undetermined." Reed met her gaze steadily. "My future and Vector 8s are now linked. The gravitational adjustments I implemented require ongoing maintenance. Without regular recalibration by someone who understands my methods, the orbit will begin to decay again within days." Counselor Zex's implants flashed with skepticism. "You expect us to believe our engineers cannot reverse engineer your work?" "They can try," Reed said with a slight shrug. "But gravitational engineering isn't just mathematics. It's intuition, feel. My mother called it listening to the space between objects. Your engineers are technically proficient, but they lack that perspective." The Queen studied him with those unsettling black eyes. "You speak of your human mother often," she observed. "She must have been exceptional for a primitive species." Reed felt a flare of anger, but kept his expression neutral. "Exceptional enough that your scientists recruited her for your gravity drive programs, before her laboratory accident." A ripple of surprise passed through the chamber. Even Sierra, standing quietly behind Reed, reacted with a pulse of her implants. "You claim kinship with Dr. Elaine Reed?" Counselor Krex demanded. The human consultant who worked on the prototype gravity cores? I claim nothing, Reed replied. I state facts. Elaine Reed was my mother. Her work is the foundation of your current technology, and her death was no accident. The Queen leaned forward slightly in her floating chair. You've harbored this knowledge, this grudge, for all these years? Waiting for an opportunity to strike back? Not to strike back, Reed corrected. To continue her work, to prove that humans are more than assets to be used and discarded. A long silence followed his words. The Vicari counselors exchanged glances, their implants pulsing with rapid communication that Reed couldn't interpret. Finally, the Queen spoke again. Lieutenant Veith proposed that you might be defective, neurologically abnormal compared to other humans. I now suspect the opposite is true. You may represent what humans could become, given the proper development. Reed said nothing, waiting for her to continue. The position of systems coordinator will be formalized, the Queen announced. With authority over gravitational systems only, under Vicari supervision, Officer Sierra will serve as your liaison to the Council. Counselor Zek stepped forward again. Your magnitude. This sets a dangerous precedent. The precedent was set the moment we underestimated this human's capabilities. The Queen interrupted. Better to contain and utilize his skills than to create a martyr that might inspire others. Reed understood the calculation perfectly. Keep your enemies closer. Use them until they're no longer useful. Then dispose of them. But he had made his own calculations. I accept the position, he said, with two conditions. The Queen's expression hardened. You are not in a position to make demands, human. Requests, then, Reed amended smoothly. First, the human maintenance workers must be permitted access to all technical areas they service. The corridor restrictions have always been inefficient. The Queen considered this briefly, then nodded. Acceptable, with proper supervision. And your second request? Marcus is to be assigned as my assistant, Reed said. His technical knowledge complements mine. The gray-haired human? Lieutenant Veith asked, surprised. He has no special skills in our records. He has loyalty, Reed replied, and a family he protects. Both are valuable to me. Another silent exchange of implant pulses between the Vicari leaders. Finally, the Queen nodded again. Granted. But understand this. Systems Coordinator Reed, your position exists at my discretion. Prove your value, and you may continue. Become a liability. She left the threat unspoken. I understand gravity. Your magnitude, Reed said, echoing his words from the beating platform. Including the gravity of my situation. Good, the Queen said. You are dismissed. Officer Sierra will show you to your new quarters. Your duties begin immediately. As Reed and Sierra left the chamber, he felt the weight of Vicari eyes on his back. Calculating, suspicious, perhaps even fearful. Good. Fear was a useful tool when wielded correctly. You never mentioned your mother was Dr. Elaine Reed, Sierra said quietly as they walked through the elite corridors. Her work is still studied by our engineers. Would it have mattered? Reed asked. Would knowing my mother helped build the technology that keeps us all alive have prevented the beatings, the enslavement? Sierra's implants pulsed with what might have been discomfort. I don't know, she admitted. Vicari society is structured, hierarchical. Change comes slowly. Not today, Reed pointed out. Today, change came very quickly indeed. Sierra led him to a small but private chamber near the gravity core, quarters normally reserved for junior Vicari officers. The space was simple but comfortable, with actual furniture instead of the sleeping shelves assigned to human workers. These will be your quarters, she explained, accessible to the core for your duties, but also monitored. Of course, Reed said, unsurprised. He entered the room, noting the observation devices immediately. They weren't even trying to hide them. Sierra hesitated at the doorway. The Council will be watching for any mistake, any sign of deception or sabotage. They'll be looking for reasons to revoke your position. And you? Reed asked. What will you be looking for, Officer Sierra? She seemed taken aback by the question. I am simply following orders, serving as liaison. Reed studied her face, the way her implants pulsed with uncertainty. You were the only one who spoke in my defense during the beatings, he noted. Why? Sierra's silver skin seemed to shimmer slightly, the Vicari equivalent of a blush. Perhaps. Efficiency, she said, though the pulse of her implants suggested there was more to it. Damaging skilled assets is counterproductive. Assets, Reed repeated. Yes, that's how your people see mine. It's how we were taught to see humans, Sierra corrected. Then, looked surprised at her own words. Reed smiled slightly. Perspective matters, doesn't it? Reference frames. What looks like a corridor to some is an axis to others. Before Sierra could respond, a chime sounded, a notification on her neural implants. The Council requests a report, she said. I must go. Reed nodded. Until tomorrow, then. After she left, Reed inspected his new quarters more thoroughly, identifying all the surveillance devices, but making no move to disable them. Let them watch. Let them think they understood what they were seeing. He stretched out on the sleeping platform, an actual bed, not the narrow shelf he'd used for 15 years, and closed his eyes. But he didn't sleep. Instead, he went through the calculations again, refining his plans. The gravity generators needed recalibration every 36 hours. Only he understood the pattern he had created. That gave him leverage, time to implement the next phase. Marcus would help, once he was reassigned, and perhaps Sierra too, though her allegiance remained uncertain. Reed flexed his right hand, feeling the empty space where the nail switch had been, removed after stabilizing the station's orbit. He wouldn't need it again. The Queen and her council thought they had contained the threat by giving him a title, a comfortable cage. They didn't understand that he had already succeeded. The hierarchies had shifted. A human now walked forbidden corridors with authority. Others would follow. The Vicari's perfect order had been disrupted, and once disrupted, could never be fully restored. Like gravity itself, social structures could be manipulated by those who understood their fundamental principles. Over the next several days, Reed established a new routine. Each morning, he would check the gravity core readings, make necessary adjustments, and assign maintenance tasks to the human workers now permitted in previously restricted areas. Marcus, officially designated as his assistant, helped coordinate these efforts while subtly spreading word of the changes throughout the human quarters. The Vicari watched with wary eyes. Some, like Lieutenant Veith, made no attempt to hide their disdain for the new arrangement. Others, particularly the engineers who worked closely with Reed, developed a grudging respect for his technical abilities. Sierra remained a constant presence, escorting Reed through the station and observing his work at the gravity core. Her initial stiffness gradually gave way to professional curiosity, then to something approaching collegiality. She asked questions about his methods, his understanding of gravitational principles, even occasionally about his mother's work. Dr. Elaine Reed theorized that gravity could be directionally manipulated on a quantum level, she said one day, as they inspected a secondary gravity node. But our engineers could never replicate her results after she was gone. Reed's hands paused on the control panel. Because they approached it mathematically, he said after a moment. My mother understood that gravity is as much about relationship as it is about mass and distance. You have to feel the connections, not just calculate them. Sierra watched as he made a minute adjustment to the node's alignment. Is that what you're doing? Feeling the connections? Reed nodded. Every part of this station exists in relationship to every other part. The gravity generators, the hull, the people inside. It's all connected by invisible threads of force. When you understand those relationships, you can change them. Like you changed the relationship between humans and Vicari on Vector 8, Sierra observed quietly. Reed glanced at her, surprised by the insight. Her implants pulsed with a pattern he had come to recognize as thoughtfulness. That wasn't my primary goal, he admitted. But yes, that too is changing. Sierra moved closer, lowering her voice, although they were alone in the node chamber. The council is divided about you. Some want to eliminate you as soon as they can train replacements. Others see potential value in your approach. And the Queen? She watches, calculates, like gravity itself. She exerts force without revealing her true nature. Reed smiled slightly at the analogy. And you, Sierra? Where do you stand in this divided council? Her implants pulsed rapidly. Uncertainty. Conflict. I am reconsidering many things I once took as immutable law. Before Reed could respond, his communications device chimed with an alert from the main gravity core. He checked the readout and frowned. Fluctuations in Section 3. We should investigate. As they made their way to Section 3, Reed noticed something had changed in the station's atmosphere. The human workers they passed no longer kept their eyes downcast when Vicari approached. Instead, they looked up, acknowledging Reed with subtle nods or gestures. And the Vicari, while still maintaining their air of superiority, seemed less comfortable in their authority. The social gravity had shifted, just as Reed had intended. Section 3 housed a tertiary gravity coupling that helped maintain Vector 8's orientation relative to the gas giant. When Reed and Sierra arrived, they found Marcus already there, directing 2 other human workers in diagnostic procedures. Systems Coordinator. Marcus greeted Reed formally, though his eyes conveyed a more personal message. We've isolated the fluctuation to the primary coupling manifold. Reed moved to the control panel, studying the readouts. The variance is increasing, he noted. We need to rebalance the field immediately. As he worked on the adjustments, Sierra stood nearby, observing both his techniques and the interaction between the humans. Reed was aware of her scrutiny, but focused on the task at hand. The fluctuations were concerning. Not dangerous yet, but indicative of a larger problem developing within Vector 8's gravitational system. This coupling is showing signs of quantum destabilization, he finally announced. The same pattern that appeared before our orbit began to decay. Sierra's implants pulsed with alarm. Could the station be at risk again? Not immediately, Reed assured her. But we need to implement a more comprehensive recalibration protocol. One that addresses the quantum-level interactions, not just the macro-gravitational fields. I'll inform the Council, Sierra said, already activating her neural communication link. Reed turned to Marcus. I need you to check all secondary couplings in sectors 1 through 4. Look for similar fluctuation patterns. Marcus nodded, understanding the real message beneath the technical instructions. Right away, Coordinator. Should I involve the other maintenance teams? Yes, Reed said. The more eyes we have on this, the better. As Marcus and the other workers departed, Sierra completed her communication with the Council. They're concerned, she reported. Counselor Zex suggested that these fluctuations might be deliberate. Your way of maintaining leverage. Reed sighed. Typical Vicari thinking. Assuming manipulation instead of cooperation. He gestured to the readouts. The quantum destabilization is real, verifiable by any of your engineers. It's a natural consequence of the orbital correction we implemented. Sierra studied him for a moment. But you anticipated it, didn't you? You knew this would happen. I suspected it might, Reed admitted. Any complex system seeks equilibrium. When we forced Vector 8 back into its proper orbit, we created new stresses that now need to be addressed. And only you can address them? Sierra asked, a hint of the old suspicion in her voice. Reed met her gaze directly. Not only me. Anyone who understands the principles involved could do it. The question is whether your people are willing to learn those principles, or if they prefer to maintain the illusion of superiority. Sierra's implants pulsed rapidly as she processed his words. Finally, she said, "Teach me." Reed blinked in surprise. "What?" "Teach me your understanding of gravitational relationships," Sierra clarified. "Not just the calculations, but the feeling you described, the connections." Reed studied her face, looking for deception but finding only genuine interest. "Why?" "Because you're right," she said simply. "Our approach is limited by our assumptions. And because—" She hesitated, then continued. "Because I want to understand what my people have been missing. About gravity, about humans, about everything." For the first time since his confrontation with the Queen, Reed felt a genuine sense of hope, not just for temporary leverage, but for lasting change. "All right," he agreed, "but not here. We need somewhere with a direct view of the gas giant. Somewhere we can see what we're feeling." Sierra considered this, then nodded. "I know a place." She led him to an observation deck in the upper levels of Vector 8, an area normally reserved for Vicari elite. The vast viewing window offered an unobstructed vista of the gas giant below, its amber storms swirling in hypnotic patterns. Reed moved to the window, placing his scarred hand against the transparent material. "This is where it begins," he said softly. "Feeling the pull between bodies, the station and the planet, you and me. Everything connected by invisible threads of force." Sierra joined him at the window, hesitantly placing her silver hand beside his. "I don't feel anything," she admitted. "Just the standard gravitational field." "Close your eyes," Reed instructed. "Don't try to analyze the gravity. Just be aware of it. The weight of your body, the pull toward the floor, the subtle variations as the station orbits." Sierra complied, her implants pulsing more slowly as she concentrated. For several minutes, they stood in silence, hands pressed against the window, feeling the forces that bound them to the station to the gas giant, all of it to the universe beyond. "There," Sierra finally whispered. Rhythm. Like a heartbeat, but slower." Reed smiled. "That's the orbital resonance. The gravity of the gas giant pulling on Vector 8, and the station's generators pushing back. A constant dialogue of force." Sierra opened her eyes, looking at Reed with new understanding. "Is this how your mother taught you? Through feeling rather than calculation?" "Both," Reed said. "The feeling guides the intuition, but the math confirms it. One without the other is incomplete." They spent hours at the observation window, Reed explaining the principles of quantum gravitational interaction, while Sierra listened and questioned, her implants pulsing with new patterns of comprehension. By the time they finally left the observation deck, something fundamental had changed between them, a shift as subtle yet profound as the gravitational fluctuations Reed had detected. "We should check the main core readings," Sierra suggested, as they walked through the upper-level corridors. "If the destabilization is progressing—" She stopped abruptly as they rounded a corner and encountered Lieutenant Veith with two other Vicari officers. Veith's implants pulsed with cold hostility. "Officer Sierra," he said, ignoring Reed completely. "The Queen requests your presence, immediately, alone." Sierra glanced at Reed, then back to Veith. "I'm currently supervising the systems coordinator's inspection of—" "The human can find his way back to his quarters," Veith interrupted. "This is a matter of council security." Reed sensed the tension in the encounter. Something had changed in the political landscape. "Go," he told Sierra. "I'll continue the diagnostics on the secondary nodes." She hesitated, then nodded. "I'll contact you when I'm finished with the council." As Sierra departed with Veith and the other officers, Reed made his way to the gravity core, his mind racing with calculations and contingencies. The Queen, summoning Sierra so abruptly, suggested a shift in the Council's position. Perhaps they had detected the growing rapport between Reed and his Vicari liaison. At the core, Reed found Marcus waiting, his expression tense. "The secondary couplings all show the same pattern," he reported quietly. "Quantum destabilization spreading throughout the system." Reed nodded, unsurprised. "How are the preparations in the maintenance sector?" "Complete," Marcus assured him. "Everyone's ready when you give the word." "Not yet," Reed cautioned. "Sierra may be our ally, but the Council is still divided. We need more time to bring the critical systems into alignment." Marcus glanced nervously at the Vicari engineers working at nearby consoles. "Time may be running out," he whispered. "There are rumors of a special security detail being formed. Humans loyal to the Vicari, armed and trained to replace us." Reed frowned. This was an unwelcome development, though not entirely unexpected. "Keep monitoring the couplings," he instructed. "I need to make some adjustments to the primary field generator." For the next several hours, Reed worked at the core controls, making subtle changes to Vector 8's gravitational parameters. To the observing Vicari engineers, it appeared he was simply stabilizing the quantum fluctuations. In reality, he was preparing the system for a much more dramatic transformation. Sierra did not return. As the station's cycle moved into night phase and the core crew changed shifts, Reed finally returned to his quarters, exhausted but satisfied with the day's progress. The core adjustments were proceeding according to plan, and the human workers throughout the station were ready for what came next. He had just settled onto his sleeping platform when the door to his quarters slid open without announcement. Sierra stood in the doorway, her silver skin dull with fatigue, her implants pulsing with an erratic pattern Reed had never seen before. "They know," she said without preamble. Reed sat up slowly. "Know what exactly?" Sierra entered the room, allowing the door to close behind her. "About your mother's final project, the quantum gravity inversion theory. They think you're trying to implement it on Vector 8. Reed kept his expression neutral, though his pulse quickened. "And are they concerned about this theory?" "Concerned?" Sierra gave a short, harsh laugh. "They're terrified. Dr. Elaine Reed's last transmission before her accident predicted that quantum gravity inversion could dissolve hierarchical structures at a fundamental level, not just in physical systems, but in social and political ones as well." Reed stood up, moving to face Sierra directly. "My mother believed that gravity was more than a physical force," he said carefully. "That it represented a universal principle of relationship between bodies, between people, between societies. And you've been implementing her theory all along," Sierra said. It wasn't a question. "The fluctuations, the recalibrations, they're not just stabilizing the station, they're changing it, changing us." Reed didn't deny it. "Have you come to warn me, or to arrest me?" Sierra's implants pulsed rapidly, conflicted. "The Queen has ordered your immediate termination," she said quietly. "Lieutenant Veith is assembling a security team now. They'll be here within the hour." "And yet you came to me first," Reed observed. "Why?" Sierra met his gaze directly. "Because I felt it today, at the observation window. The connection, the relationship, not just between bodies in space, but between us, between all of us on this station." She paused, then added, "Your mother was right. Gravity is more than a force, it's a truth." Reed felt a surge of emotion, vindication, relief, hope. "And what will you do with that truth, Sierra?" "Help you complete what you've started," she said firmly. "If you'll have me." Reed smiled. "I was counting on it." He moved to the small desk in his quarters and activated a hidden panel, revealing a makeshift communications device. "Marcus," he called softly. "Initiation phase. Coordinate with all sectors." "Understood," came Marcus's reply. "All teams standing by." Reed turned back to Sierra. We have 20 minutes before the inversion cascade begins. I need access to the Queen's gravitational override codes. Sierra's implants pulsed with momentary hesitation, then steadied with resolve. I can get you into the Royal Command Center. The codes will be accessible there. Then let's go, Reed said. It's time for gravity to find its proper balance. They moved through the station with purpose, Sierra using her authority to bypass security checkpoints and divert attention from their true destination. Throughout Vector 8, human maintenance workers were quietly taking up positions near critical systems, not to sabotage them, but to ensure they remained operational during what was to come. The Royal Command Center was located in the most secure section of Vector 8, adjacent to the Queen's private chambers. As they approached, Sierra's implants projected authorization codes that made the guards step aside without question. They'll check with the Council soon, she warned, as they entered the command center. We have minutes at most. Reed moved immediately to the central console, a sophisticated array of controls that could override every system on the station. The gravitational authorization sequence, he prompted. I need full access. Sierra placed her hand on the console, her implants connecting directly with the station's mainframe. Transferring authority now, she said, her voice strained with concentration. You'll have approximately 40 seconds before the security protocols detect the anomaly. Reed's scarred hands flew across the controls, inputting the final parameters for his mother's quantum gravity inversion theory. The console hummed with energy as the commands were processed and transmitted to the gravity core. Done, he announced, stepping back from the console, just as alarms began to sound throughout the command center. Security breach detected, announced the station's automated system. Unauthorized gravitational parameter modifications in progress. Sierra's implants flashed with urgency. We need to get to the observation deck, she said. The effects will be most visible there. As they raced through the corridors, chaos erupted around them. Vicari guards and officials rushed in all directions, responding to alarms and contradictory orders. Human workers moved with surprising coordination, securing critical junctions and systems while avoiding direct confrontation. The observation deck was empty when they arrived, everyone else drawn to more urgent stations during the emergency. Reed and Sierra moved to the vast window, watching as the amber storms of the gas giant seemed to pulse with new intensity. What exactly will happen? Sierra asked, her voice hushed with anticipation. Quantum gravity inversion doesn't negate gravity, Reed explained, his eyes fixed on the swirling storms below. It reveals its true nature. Instead of a force that only pulls down, it becomes a force that connects in all directions equally. As he spoke, a subtle vibration began to travel through the station, not the violent shaking of structural failure, but a gentle, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat growing stronger. It's starting, Reed whispered. Throughout Vector 8, gravity began to change, not disappearing as it had during Reed's confrontation on the platform, but transforming into something new. Objects still had weight, but that weight no longer seemed to pull exclusively toward the floor. Instead, it manifested as a kind of mutual attraction between all things, a force that connected rather than dominated. On the command level, Vicari guards found themselves unable to maintain their authoritative postures. The hierarchical formation that had defined their presence for generations dissolved into a more organic arrangement, their bodies naturally seeking balance with each other and their surroundings. In the Queen's chamber, Varela felt her gravity throne shift beneath her, no longer elevating her above others, but instead connecting her to the station and all its inhabitants in a new, unsettling way. And on the maintenance levels, human workers who had lived their lives pressed down by both physical and social gravity found themselves standing straighter, moving with a newfound sense of equality and purpose. The Queen will try to reverse this, Sierra said, her implants pulsing with the new gravitational patterns. The Council will never accept such a fundamental change. They can't reverse it, Reed told her with quiet confidence. The quantum inversion is self-sustaining now. The more they try to reimpose the old patterns, the more the new relationships will assert themselves. As if in response to his words, Lieutenant Veith and a team of armed guards burst onto the observation deck, weapons raised. Systems Coordinator Reed, VTH announced formally, though his usual commanding tone seemed diminished by the altered gravity. By order of Queen Varela, you are to be terminated immediately for sabotage and sedition. Reed turned calmly to face them. You can try, he said, but you'll find it difficult to maintain your authority when gravity itself no longer recognizes hierarchy. The guards moved forward, but their steps faltered as the transformed gravitational field made their practiced formations impossible to maintain. Their weapons, designed to work with standard gravitational parameters, wavered erratically in their hands. Sierra stepped between Reed and the guards, her implants pulsing with determination. Lieutenant Veith, she said clearly, I am formally requesting council review of this execution order under the statute of technical necessity. Veith's implants flashed with frustration. There is no time for review. The human has compromised the entire station. Has he? Sierra challenged. Check the orbital telemetry. Check the structural integrity monitors. Vector 8 is more stable now than it has ever been. While they argued, Reed closed his eyes briefly, feeling the new gravitational relationship spreading throughout the station. His mother's theory was proving correct beyond even his expectations. The quantum inversion wasn't just affecting physical objects, it was altering the very nature of authority and submission on Vector 8. Veith received a neural transmission that made his implants pulse erratically. The Queen, he announced, his voice strained. She's coming here, now. Minutes later, Queen Varela entered the observation deck, not as a hologram, but in physical form. Her elongated silver body moved differently in the inverted gravity field, no longer projecting dominance but instead seeking balance with her surroundings. What have you done, human? She demanded, though her voice lacked its usual imperious tone. Reed faced her, without fear or deference. I have completed my mother's work, he said simply. Quantum gravity inversion, a fundamental realignment of forces. Restore the proper order immediately, the Queen commanded. I can't, Reed replied. No one can. The inversion is self-sustaining now. It will continue to spread throughout Vector 8, redefining relationships at every level. The Queen's black eyes narrowed. You speak of relationships. This is about more than gravity, isn't it? It always was, Reed acknowledged. My mother understood that physical forces mirror social ones. Hierarchies exist because we accept their gravity. Change the gravity. Change the hierarchy. And you believe this? Inversion will turn humans into equals with Vicari. The Queen's tone was incredulous, but uncertain. Not immediately, Reed said. But, over time, yes. The inverted gravity field makes it physically impossible to maintain the old patterns of dominance and submission. Bodies in proximity now seek mutual balance, rather than hierarchical arrangement. Social structures will follow the same principle. The Queen was silent for a long moment, her implants pulsing with complex calculations. Finally, she said, you could have simply destroyed us, sent the station into the gas giant. Why this instead? Because destruction only perpetuates the cycle, Reed explained. My mother believed in transformation, not annihilation. So do I. Sierra stepped forward, standing beside Reed. Your magnitude, she said formally. The quantum inversion cannot be reversed, but it can be managed. With the systems coordinator's expertise, we can establish a new equilibrium for Vector 8. The Queen's gaze shifted between them, recognition dawning in her black eyes. You've been working with him, she said to Sierra. You've changed. I've found balance, Sierra corrected, as we all must now. Outside the vast observation window, the amber storms of the gas giant churned on, indifferent to the monumental shift occurring within Vector 8. But Reed saw beauty in those storms, the same beauty he had glimpsed years ago, standing in Corridor 7 Alpha, beginning the long process that had led to this moment. "What now?" the Queen finally asked. And the simple question, so different from her usual commands, signified the first acknowledgement of the new reality. Reed turned to the window, gazing out at the swirling gases below. "Now, we learn to live with a different kind of gravity," he said softly. "One that binds us together, rather than holds us down." Sierra moved to stand beside him at the window, her silver hand finding his scarred one, in a gesture that would have been unthinkable days before. "Gravity can't hold me," she whispered, echoing words Reed had spoken in their earlier lessons. "No," Reed agreed, looking not at the gas giant now, but at the reflection in the window, humans and Vicari standing together on the observation deck, their postures already shifting toward a new kind of equilibrium. "It can only connect us." The Queen and her guards remained near the entrance, uncertain in this unfamiliar arrangement of power. But they made no move to separate Reed and Sierra, no attempt to reassert the old order. The inverted gravity field made such assertions physically uncomfortable, almost impossible. Marcus's voice came through on Reed's communication device. "All systems stabilized," he reported. "The inversion is complete throughout the station. What are your orders, Coordinator?" Reed smiled slightly at the title, no longer a token of contained authority, but a genuine role in Vector 8's new configuration. "No orders," he replied. "Just keep everything balanced." As the cycle shifted toward a new day phase, amber light from the gas giant filled the observation deck, illuminating humans and Vicari alike in its warm glow. Vector 8 continued its orbit, transformed from within by a force as fundamental as gravity itself. A force that Reed's mother had understood and that Reed had finally implemented. Not the gravity of domination, but the gravity of connection. Not the weight that crushes, but the attraction that binds. A new equilibrium, spreading outward from Vector 8 like ripples in a gravitational field, reaching toward other stations, other worlds, carrying with it the promise of transformation. Reed gazed out at the storm-laced horizon of the gas giant, feeling the station's pulse around him, no longer a mechanical heartbeat of oppression, but a rhythm of mutual existence. The Queen had ordered him beaten, never expecting the slave to hit back. But Reed hadn't struck at her or her people. He had struck at gravity itself, and in doing so, he had set them all free.